Alrighty, so now we are down to the last two episodes of the Moving Forward series episode, and now we first talk about the team that lost MLS Cup 2023. That is LAFC, and tomorrow I'll do the final Moving Forward series of the 2024 season, and that of course is talk about the MLS Cup winner and the current defending MLS Cup champion, that is the Columbus Crew. Now, for LAFC, obviously, there's a huge concern in terms of what's gone on in terms of this offseason, and we'll definitely get to talk about the huge concern that they have heading into next season and all the things that have not really quite gone well for them doing this off season. But in terms of last season itself, I mean, you can look at it two ways. You can look at it as a way where, it's quite incredible the fact that they have played by far the most game out of any team. They've played 50 close to 60 plus game, and still somehow they were able to make free cup final and make it back to MLS Cup. But then on the other hand, you can look at a glass half empty, or maybe you kind of like a pessimistic LAFC fans have said that this season is considered a failure because they didn't win anything. I mean, they had chances to win trophy this season and made it to three different cup final in three different competition, and they didn't win any of them. But nevertheless, they finished with a 14-10-10 record and finished with 52 points. They scored 54 goals while allowing 39 goals with a goal differential of plus 15. They finished third in the Western Conference, but unfortunately, they did lose the MLS Cup to the Columbus Crew. And that was a game where, I will say that they were kind of considered the underdog, and that's kind of something you usually don't say about LAFC coming into a game, even in the most important game of the season. But that Columbus Crew team was stacked. Like that team was really good, and that quality kind of showed in that game when they would just kind of getting run apart. Especially in that first half of that MLS Cup against the Columbus Crew. Now, in terms of the head coach, it's Steve Cherundolo since 2022, and despite there's been some part of LAFC fan base that have hated Cherundolo and want him to be fired. I'll say that he has done a really good job with the team, and he has kind of proven wrong to many people, including myself, when they decided to hire him as a replacement of Bob Bradley. This is a guy that hasn't really done much and was part of the Las Vegas Lights team that was pretty much a laughing stock in the USL Championship. So there was a lot of skepticism that whether he's gonna do well, because it's one thing to have talent on your hand, but you still need to have a competent head coach to get those talent to do well. And so far, during his tenure, even though there's been times where he has been labeled as a guy that can't get it done doing the biggest game possible, especially in these cup final, he's overall has done a good job in terms of really making this team competitive throughout his tenure. And then of course the chief soccer officer is John Forrington. He's been uh, the club chief soccer officer since the club was founded, and still the only chief soccer officer and the only GM that LAFC has had ever since they came into the league in 2018. Now, in terms of top goal scored, unsurprisingly, is Denis Bouanga. Not only scoring 20 goals this season, but he ended up being the Golden Boot winner this year. Then you got Carlos Vela with 9 goals, Ryan Hollinshead with 4 goals, Timothy Tillman with 4 goals, and Stepa Buke with 3 goals. Top assist leader, Carlos Vela actually leads the team with 12 assists, and this is despite the fact that many people said that he had a down season, and that we'll also get to, talk about the future of Vela and whether or not if he's going to re-sign with this team, because he's out of contract this offseason. Then you got Denise Bouanga with 7 assists, Mateus Bilguth with 4 assists, Ilya Sanchez with 3 assists, and then the recent retired Giorgio Chiellini with 2 assists to round up the top 5 assist list for this LAFC team. Now, when you look at the last 5 seasons, they've always been a competitive team. I mean, besides what happened in 2021, they have made it to the playoffs every single season since they came into the league in 2018. Last year, they finished with 14-10-10 record and finished with 52 points. But following that, they finished with a 21-4-9 record and finished with 67 points. That was the year that they not only won the Supporters Shield once again, but also a year where they win that elusive MLS Cup that's been alluring them ever since they came into the league. Now, before that, it was not so great. They miss out on the playoffs with a 12-9-13 record and finished with 45 points. And as I said, that is still the only season the LAFC has missed out on the playoffs in their young time in MLS. In 2020, the COVID shortened season, they finished with a 9-5-8 record and finished with 32 points. But then, previous to that, they won the Supporters Shield again. That was their first Supporters Shield with a 21-9-4 record and finished with 72 points. And that was at that point was the most point any MLS team has ever had in a regular season. Obviously, now it's been surpassed by the New England Revolution just a couple of years ago with 73 points. Now, in terms of average attendance, 22,155, and I'll say that in terms of that number is definitely tickets sold in terms of the announced attendance because I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I mean, yes, even though LAFC has sold out every single game, there's been a lot of empty seats. I've seen it at BMO Stadium, and I know there's that stereotype of LA crowd does get into the stadium very late. I mean that's a stereotype that goes back to the Dodgers day of how people always said that Dodgers fans don't show up until the fourth inning because of bad traffic and so on. But still, that number it's a little bit misleading, and that again when you look at all these attendance number, it's always by the tickets sold and not actually butts in the seats. And I have a feeling there's been times this season where I've seen that there is no way in the world they sold out that stadium. There was a lot of empty seats that I noticed it. But again, that's just kind of an LA kind of culture of how fans are gonna always show up late in the stadium no matter what, except maybe if it's a big occasion like what we saw with MLS Cup last year. Now, in terms of MVP, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's Denis Bouanga. He's the guy that carried this team on the attack and winning the Golden Boot. And in terms of disappointment, there was definitely a couple that I could have put as disappointment. I could have put Christian Oliveira in there, even though I thought he did really well this season, though, he was kind of a little bit a curse in terms of the goal scoring department. You can't say that about Mario Gonzalez. I mean, again, there's just something about LAFC when it comes to filling their third DP, and I actually got to double check to make sure if Mario Gonzalez is actually a designated player. I might be absolutely wrong with this, but I'm just saying that there's no reason why LAFC never filled up that third DP spot because that third DP spot is simply cursed. I mean, this goes back to when they first signed their third DP as Andre Horta a couple of years ago, and yeah, that did not go so well. And then they of course got Brian Rodriguez as their third DP. He had a decent run with LAFC, but kind of fell out of favor. And again, I'm not sure this is entirely true, but I think Mario Gonzalez was named the third DP. It's either him or Christian Oliveira that if I recall, that was named the third DP. And yeah, it shouldn't be to anybody surprised that they didn't quite work out, and Mario Gonzalez just never really quite worked out with LAFC, and now he's being loaned back to Europe, and we'll see how he's going to do. But yeah, with all the expectation of how he was supposed to carry the shoulder off of Denise Owanga, 1 goal and 2 assists in 500 minutes, it's not going to do so. Now, in terms of young player to watch, surprisingly, this LAFC team does have some good young talent on their disposal. I could have easily gone either with Mateus Bogusz and Step Butte. Both of those guys had a really good season coming in, and both of those guys are considered young players that have a lot of potential to do well. But I'm gonna go with Nathan Ordaz. I have really been impressed of this kid in terms of the limited minutes that he has, and that he could be a guy that I think could have some upside to this team. Now, obviously, because the fact that he is joining a team that is always competitive, it's always hard for kids that is coming out of an academy of a team that have always been competitive and always trust on veteran player to break into the team. But I think Nathan Ordaz could be that guy. Albeit, be it if it doesn't work out, I think somebody will pick him up, and that this guy does have a lot of talent, especially in the limited minutes that he has. He has that goal scoring ability and that ability that I think is going to get better and better as he continues to develop his career. Now, in terms of what went right for this team, well, as I mentioned, Denise Bouanga had a golden boot type of season, 20 goals this season, and at time was simply carry this team into relevance. They made an MLS Cup again. So again, I know that might not sound like an impressive feat, but considering the fact that they played 50 plus game and yet they still were able to make it to MLS Cup, and especially of how unpredictable the Western Conference was this year. Like the Western Conference this year, unlike the East, where it's an absolute bloodbath because there's so many good teams in the West. I mean, it's almost like a gong show at times this season in the West. I mean, there's been just so many teams that are just very inconsistent, can't really put it together, and that LAFC is one of those teams too. I mean, it's not like they had an incredible full regular season. They had times that they have struggled, especially near the latter part of the season, where if it wasn't for them, kind of have a very similar run as what we saw with NYCFC, where I mentioned before how NYCFC had a really bad stretch, and that there was a lot of people calling for Ronnie Dalia's heads, and then they picked it up in the last couple of games, really ride that momentum, and eventually won an MLS Cup. That was kind of the same case with this LAFC team. Like between September and late August, they were going through a long dry period in terms of not scoring goals, and that they don't look like anything resembling a team that could defend their MLS crown. But then they meet Minnesota United, and as a Loons fan, I want to apologize to every Western Conference fans that they basically make them gain the confidence back because they scored 5 goals against Minnesota in that game, and instantly they found their mojo back. I mean, they started to look like an unstoppable force, beating Austin in the next game 4-2 and so on. And that, yeah, I mean that really kind of carried the momentum into the playoffs, and that in the playoffs, I mean they definitely face some adversity too, and they have also faced some controversial moment. Again, Vancouver fans are still going to be very mad about what happened in game two that first round, and then they of course had to grind it out against Seattle on the road. But nevertheless, I mean the fact that they made it to MLS Cup, and I don't care what you say, make it to MLS Cup back to back year is not very easy. Even if you have seen some recent teams that have done it, like Seattle and Toronto has done it a couple of times. And then of course, going back to them playing a ton of games again, they play easily the most game out of any team. They were playing close to 60 plus game. They were involved pretty much in every single competition that an MLS team can be: a U.S. Open Cup, a CONCACAF Champions League, the Leagues Cup, a regular season, and then of course into the playoffs. And then let's also not forget about the Campines Cup that they had to uh to play, being the MLS Cup champion. And as a result, despite all that, they still made it to the Free Cup final, made it to the CONCACAF Champions League final, made it to Campines Cup, even though, I mean, it's a one-off game. I don't know if that's kind of count as a cup final, but of course they also made it to MLS Cup again, and that again. Anytime when you see a team made it to Free Cup final in a single season, that is impressive feat and something that we usually don't see happen. But unfortunately, despite the fact that they made it to Free Cup final, this is where the most pessimistic LAFC fans, and also the high expectation LAFC fans will point out that, yeah, it's great that they made it to all Free Cup final. Did they win any one of them? They lost all three cup final. They lost in the CONCACAF Champions League final to Leon in a hard fought battle, and then they lost to Tigres in the Campeones Cup. And then, not to mention, in terms of MLS Cup, they lost to the Columbus Crew. I would say that the Columbus Crew loss in MLS Cup probably is the least painful cup final loss that they had, and that sounds crazy considering that losing an MLS Cup is always not easy. But consider, you look at the other two cup final. I mean, against Tigres, yes, it is Tigres, but I just had a feeling this LAFC team was going to get the better, and especially after what happened in CCL, I thought this was a good chance for them to redeem themselves and be a powerhouse like Tigres. Didn't happen. And then of course I think the most painful one has to be the CCL final against Leon. I mean, again, this is they're playing against a team that Leon has always been labeled as a team that always choke in terms of the big stage in the international competition, and especially this is the chance for LAFC to get the win, especially after getting an impressive 1-1 draw against Leon down in Mexico. All they need to do is to not even win the game, but just tap a draw in the game, or not a scoring draw, and they would win the CONCACAF Champions League and join the Seattle Sounders as the other MLS team to win the CONCACAF Champions League. Didn't happen. They lost that one at home, and arguably is one of the most painful loss that LAFC has ever suffered in their time as an MLS franchise. And then, of course, besides Bawanga, again, there's a bit of a drop off in terms of the goal scoring ability. Although I will say that when it comes to goal scoring, obviously Bawanga carries the weight, but this team does have kind of that same moniker that I've talked about with the Houston Dynamo and RSL, where the team is the star. They always will have a guy that will come in the clutch and score the goals for this team. I mean, it was very similar to what we saw last season, where they rely heavily on their bench in terms of coming off of it and scoring goals for this team. In fact, last season I think they had the most goals out of any teams that is coming off the bench. So yeah, there's also that kind of display. And it could be a positive thing, but obviously, there was definitely a huge drop off when you consider Denise Bawanga kind of carry this team at times on the attacking end. And then lastly is kind of this thing that I'll perfectly transition in terms of the moving forward part of this LAFC team, and this is where a lot of LAFC fans have some concern right now. And that, of course, is there's been tons of roster turnover this offseason. They have lost a lot of pieces in terms of this core, and that, moving forward in terms of the first thing that I'll talk about is where in the world is those reinforcements. So, with them losing tons of players this offseason, you would expect that they would find some reinforcement, especially, John Thornton, one of the more aggressive kind of GM in the league in terms of finding reinforcement. But unfortunately, it has not been the case. I mean, the only reinforcement they bought was Hugo Lloris, and even that was kind of a surprising move because I didn't expect LAFC was going to get a World Cup winning goalkeeper like Hugo Lloris, and especially what's even more surprising is that I didn't think they really need a goalkeeper considering Maxime Crepeau was doing so well for this team, and yet they decided to sign Hugo Lloris, and then they decided to send Maxime Crepeau to the Portland Timbers. Yeah, I mean, I don't get that, and I will also say this about John Thornton, as good as he has done in terms of building the core of this LAFC team, and that this LAFC team has been a competitive team for ever since they came into the league. He has also made some really strange decision and some decision that has really backfired big time. Again, I go back to the Chicho Arango kind of decision. I feel like to this day it's still the wrong decision that they decided to let go of Chicho Arango, and that I mean, for a guy that was just scoring goals every single game, there was really no need for them to get rid of him, and that there was these rumors about him wanting to force out and stuff like that. It was kind of weird because he was scoring goals and it looks like he was having fun doing it. So why in the world did they decided to get rid of him? And this is kind of the same thing I'll say about Maxime Crepeau. There was really no need for them to move on from him, and especially it's not just him, but you look at this entire roster of how there's also kind of started to cut the some of the main part of the core. There was really no need for them to do that. I mean, they could easily just keep part of their core. I mean, it's not like they're slam in terms of the salary cap and they gotta have to shred some of the talent. They don't really need to do it, and this is where it kind of gets to my second point: is are they purposely going for a rebuild or are they going for a retool? And again, if they're going for a rebuild, there's really no reason to do so because they just had a great season. I mean, yes, I know. Obviously, there's that narrative of them not able to get the job done in the cup final, but that doesn't mean you just simply decide to tear up the core as what we see LAFC is doing right now. And then, of course, the retool part is that we'll see whether they can get those reinforcement because again, when you look at this team, I've said this before, even in the news of the week episode. It just feels like this team has gone a lot worse heading into to this season because of the pieces that they have without those reinforcement, and that shouldn't happen. I mean, it's really unnecessary too. So again, I just think that I don't blame LAFC fans being very concerned right now. The fact that there's just no reinforcement. I mean, heck, recently I've just heard that they decided to loan Stepa back to Europe, and I mean this is after they just decided to loan a couple of players to elsewhere too to even shrink the roster to a paper thin kind of thing. So again, this just it just doesn't make any sense. I want to know what exactly is John Thornton thinking about this. Does he think that maybe he decided to completely overturn the roster and hope that, the new roster and the new core that they built is going to get them over the top? Because yeah, there is a case that it could happen, but there's also a strong case where it could get a lot worse, and especially when you don't get the reinforcement that you need. And when you look at the situation that LAFC is facing right now, I don't think this team look anything like a team that could win MLS Cup again, or at least get back to MLS Cup. And a lot of that, I would say, also have to ride on the shoulder of both Vela and Bawanga. Mostly Bawanga too, because I think Vela, I do think that it probably is time for them to move on from him, because you definitely see that Carlos Vela, although he has shown that signs of brilliance at time this season, he's definitely started to age a lot, to a point where I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to not re-sign him to a new contract. Now, in terms of Bawanga, it's an interesting situation, because Bawanga had been saying that he wants to go back to France and he want to go back to Europe, and he thinks that he's good enough to do so. And you can't say no to a player like that. But that being said, there's also where I go back to the reinforcement, and that if they do decide to move on for Bawanga, they better hope that they found a good replacement for him, because Bawanga is really the heart and soul of this team, and losing him, that ceiling all of a sudden dropped really low for this LAFC team, especially on the attacking end. So yeah, overall, a lot of question you got to say for this LAFC team, and I won't be surprised when I do the season preview about this team in the future. A lot could change for this team, because right now, I mean, it's really strange to see how they decided to get rid of a lot of their main core piece player, and they just don't really have any reinforcement to think about getting this team back to being a competitive team like what we've seen in the last couple of years in the Western Conference. But let me know in the comments below if you're an LAFC fan. What do you think of this video? And also, what do you think went right, went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this uncertain off season is going to end up for this LAFC team heading into next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.